In 1975, Wonder Woman saw some small screen success in her own series that saw 3 seasons. The show was a promising start for the Princess Warrior, yet in spite of that, the brand would never be brought back to the small screen, though that doesn't mean attempts weren't made along the way. Take for example 2011, when Warner Brothers decided the time was right for Wonder Woman to take flight yet again. Unfortunately, shortly thereafter, they decided they jumped the gun. The proposed show was never picked up, but an unaired, unfinished pilot does exist. Emphasis on unfinished. This thing still has a property of Warner Brothers watermark, plenty of unfinished effects, and even placement holder audio.
Yeah, bet that's a real comfort at the moment.
I'm representing the kid you almost killed.
Outside of the various pre-post-production elements, the show still has a whole slew of other issues. To credit it, it's very original. It's very different from the Wonder Woman from comics. Actually, it's so different that very little outside the actual outfit resembles the Wonder Woman character at all. So first things first, there is next to no explanation for Wonder Woman in this pilot. No origin is given for the character or even the mantle that she holds. And there's no mention of the Amazons outside of this one passing quip.
I know Amazons are endowed with various blessings.
This is Wonder Woman minus the magic, and minus the magic of Wonder Woman. Diana isn't depicted as a goddess at all, but rather just another superpowered person. We do get a reference to her original origin, with this brand new secret identity this attempt at a series set up. Here she's Diana the Myskera, a name that's a nice nod to nostalgic fans who would find very little of what they're fond of here. In an attempt to simplify the story, they completely confuse the character and complicate matters far worse. It's mentioned once in passing that she's in fact an Amazon, but in that same breath she also emphasizes that she's a human being.
It's not like we should expect the world to accept her being human.
Which, yes, I get it. I understand the point of what it is that she's saying. She's still like everybody else. She's still a person. But you're literally not a human being if you're an Amazon. Gone is her demigod backstory, and replacing it is Wonder Woman Businesswoman. You see, this Wonder Woman isn't just a superhero. She's an entity. A franchise. A brand of her own. When she's not out in costume fighting crime, she's selling and marketing her merch, serving as the leading figurehead of the Myskera Industries. Now I know what you're thinking, wow, this is a really poorly thought out secret identity, but it's actually not because there's no secrecy here whatsoever, as the public is aware that Diana, the CEO of this Wonder Woman company, is also in fact Wonder Woman herself. The public is aware that this CEO clocks out to suit up. And while this development feels new for this character, it doesn't exactly feel new generally speaking. As a matter of fact, it feels like this pilot was inspired by the success of the Iron Man franchise, which was pretty popular at the time. Also popular at the time was the Dark Knight trilogy, which this also feels somewhat inspired by, but we'll get into that later on. Even those who aren't terribly familiar with Wonder Woman and her mythos would probably be scratching their heads seeing her selling her own action figures. Having a good chunk of the runtime watching a hero in a corporate setting arguing over the chest size of Wonder Woman dolls, which, yes, is actually a thing that happens in this pilot and isn't just a punchline that I'm making up. All of this probably wasn't the right route for the character. It's not a side of the character that audiences were used to, and it wasn't an interesting enough inclusion to assure that this was something fans would warm up to. This development actually kinda sours Wonder Woman's tried and true nature.
Truth, justice, and the American way, right?
Sort of.
She's always been selfless, but having the character act as her own salesman sort of dilutes that. Now it's reasonable to question whether she's doing what she's doing because it's right, or because there's cameras on her. Is she really the hero that she claims to be? Or is she just playing a part? I understand that the intent of the creators was to really solidify her status as a hero to little girls worldwide. But like, couldn't you have just done that by having her be Wonder Woman? Like, wasn't Wonder Woman already that? Now she's a recognized role model and icon in and out of costume. Though she kinda shouldn't be. While this Wonder Woman is treated as the heroine with the heart that we all know, she certainly isn't portrayed that way. This Wonder Woman has a much darker edge. This series' hopeful really takes the hero into dark vigilante territories, which isn't ideal for Wonder Woman. She's much more angry and violent than she typically is. And look, I'm not saying Wonder Woman doesn't fight, but the Wonder Woman I know would at least try to use some restraint. This Wonder Woman is all gung-ho about hurting whoever opposes her. And never once does she use the lasso of truth to compel the unjust to tell the truth. But she does use it as a weapon on a couple of occasions, including one where she intentionally breaks a man's arm to make him talk.
Remember this?
Help! Help!
Don't do that. That bugs me.
You could have just used the Okay. Alright. See this? See this right here? Things like this are the reason that teachers make you show your work. She got the right outcome, but she did all the wrong work leading up to it. Gonna have to deduct some points there. The show's portrayal of the character doesn't fit the show's image of the character. Wonder Woman is a beloved icon and hero to children everywhere, but she's also out here using excessive force with very little hesitation. In terms of tone, I would say this show had the tone of The Dark Knight if the entire Dark Knight trilogy somehow took place in the show Smallville. This whole situation here kinda reminds me of the DCEU and their treatment of Superman. The world acknowledges the character as the legendary do-gooder that they are, but that's not the character that this material showcases. In both cases, the character's treated like a hero, but is shown to be a ruthless vigilante. And once again, this could work for Batman, but you shouldn't be painting Wonder Woman and Superman with the same brush you use for The Dark Knight. Sure, they're similar in some cases, but in most, they're polar opposites. Typically, Wonder Woman would act with confidence in almost any given situation, determined to do the right thing and never lose her cool unless the stakes are truly too high. But this Wonder Woman is untamable, even to herself. She's written to be a bit too enraged for the hero. Wonder Woman is a symbol of empowerment, but this pilot somehow confused that with vengeance. And it's not like that's my faulty analysis. These aren't my words. They're hers. I mean, she literally comes right out and threatens to murder people. This is excessively dark for a character that would only resort to such extremes under pressure or in a race against time. I'm not saying that Wonder Woman wouldn't kill. I'm saying that she would have to be out of all other options. Here, it's the only option. That's her solution. The darker, more mature take on the mythos feels incredibly misguided. Not only because it didn't match the character's mantra and mission statement, but also because it felt a little out of place for its own platform. I don't think I really need to say this, but I didn't need to hear Wonder Woman curse. Let alone say the word a bunch of times.
But I never said to merchandise. Perfect.
Wonder Woman isn't vulgar.
This feels all kinds of wrong for Wonder Woman. Well, what show did you think you were writing? At the end of the day, Wonder Woman's actions feel both too violent for Wonder Woman and too adult for the tone of the show. This just didn't work on any level. In terms of her public persona, she's somewhat working against the law. She shows disdain for lawyers, she's not compliant with officers, and she mistreats law enforcement when all they're doing is trying to enforce the law. I'm not saying Wonder Woman should always back the blue, but I'd like to think that she'd only go up against them should they give her good reason to. Here, it's just on sight. Considering her issues with the police force, it also calls into question what exactly their relationship is. Because they don't treat her like a criminal vigilante. They seem to let her stop suspects, but then they also take issue with her doing so. So why aren't they going after her? She's literally at the scenes of all these crimes. They would at least have some sort of probable cause, no? She publicly states that she's working outside the law and will go out of her way to pursue justice. Yet she seems to have next to no allies on the force, save for one who's not exactly a high-ranking officer. Her identity is common knowledge, so what stops anybody from bringing her in? Is it just because she's a millionaire in this one? The one person who puts up with her is her buddy Ed, the only friend that she has on the force. And while the guy takes liberties and goes to bat for her from time to time, he also tries to reel her back in when she's gone too far. But make no mistake, Diana Prince still exists. You see, the show didn't get rid of any pre-existing parts of the character, it just decided to keep adding additional parts. In this version of events, Diana Prince is the secret identity that Diana the Mascara uses to try to fit in. It's a persona that only exists so she could go home, wear glasses in private, pet cats, and feel lonely. Aw, just like the rest of us. The wardrobe is... well, it's certainly a choice. I would say this is indicative of the time. as back then hero outfits weren't always extremely accurate. If you don't believe me, watch Smallville, where they put the entire Justice League in hoodies. But even when the show was being promoted at the time, people actually complained about this look. It was not thought fondly of, and time has not been any more kind to it. I don't know how to say this, but I'm going to tread lightly so I can be monetized. The costumes, and sometimes the acting, almost makes it feel like you're watching a different type of entertainment. You know, the kind that you'd find on other tube or hub sites.
Like my outfit, officer? This outfit opens doors for me. It's gonna open that one, isn't it?
I don't like where this is going.
Ma'am, I happen to be a big fan, and I know you're good. But there's one of you, and 20 of us.
Stop!
I'll put it to you like this. If someone was to walk in on me reviewing this right now, I really doubt the first thing they'd think is NBC. Although they might think otherwise once they finally see the familiar famous faces that are attached to this. This would-be Wonder Woman show had a pretty star-studded cast. Wonder Woman is played by the patron saint of passed-on pilots, Adrienne Palicki, who just so happened to also star in another DC unmade pilot when they attempted to spin off Smallville with the show Aquaman. And for what the script was asking of her, I think that she did a really good job. The actress at times feels like Wonder Woman, even when the script is trying its hardest to convince us otherwise. The big problem here is that the material is working against her performance. Could she have been a good Wonder Woman? Sure, if somebody wrote her to be a good Wonder Woman. Princess Bride actor Cary Elwes plays an underling of Diana's who runs certain aspects of her company. He's an original character whose last name was changed during the production of this episode, as depending on where and when you're looking, they credit the character as Henry Demeter or Henry Johns. I even found an article citing this name change as well, which shows me that there was a fan base out there that was really craving this series. Thank God they didn't get to see what they were obsessing over all this time because, yeesh. And strangely enough, Pedro Pascal actually played the part of Ed. He'd have to wait a near decade before attaching himself to a Wonder Woman project again, but he managed to get the job done, making this one of the strangest full circle moments that only the unpredictability of life could provide you. I couldn't help but notice that Pascal and Palicki have way more chemistry here than the actress has with their actual love interest. A man who, if he did have a personality, it certainly wasn't present. Can't really blame that actor, though, necessarily. Because, yeah, he didn't make an impression, but how much of an impression can you make when you're hired for 2 scenes, one of which being you being broken up with, and the other being the end of the episode reveal? Playing the show's big bad Veronica Cale was Elizabeth Hurley, whose inclusion alone would have been enough to get me to watch, being as she's the first crush I ever remember having. Now, not that that's important, but it's incredibly important, and I want you to jot that down to include in my biography. Thank you. On top of that, she's a very talented actress who did well with what she was given. She has a very blatant, very villainous vibe to her. She's not necessarily evil, but she's like greed incarnate, caring much more about the bottom line than the body count. We didn't get nearly enough time with this character, which is a shame because she was entertaining in the role, and it seemed like she was entertained playing it. The stars don't stop there either, as the show was even calling in the big guns, with cameos from Dr. Phil and Nancy Grace. So you know, that's nothing to snicker over. Wonder Woman also has 2 distinctly different designs that she wears in this pilot. She switches between her classic look to a more modern hero attire, complete with complete pants, which feels very un-Wonder Woman-like. The show doesn't make any mention of it, it just sort of happens without any real explanation, which is weird when they put emphasis on her dressing the way that she does initially to sell more Wonder Woman toys. I'm not opposed to this, but without any dialogue mentioning the change in wardrobe, or more specifically, the reason for the change in wardrobe, it does come off as a little bit odd. I understand that Batman has a batsuit for each and every occasion, but Wonder Woman usually sticks to her one look, whatever that may be at the time. It really makes me wonder if this Wonder Woman pilot was cobbled together of different takes with different visions in mind. Because it's no secret that the final product here was actually never finalized. It just feels like there was a change in creative that made its way onto screen. I mean, I guess you could maybe say this one throwaway line is being indicative of the reason for the change.
This woman's an action figure.
She's primarily in the business of being popular so she can sell her merchandise.
She called me an action figure. Can you believe that?
Di, you are an action figure. You designed your costume to specifically look like one.
But she still wears the initial costume after that, so I don't know. It feels like it wasn't really well thought out. And if I, sitting at home watching your show and putting more thought into you making it, well then I think we know why it wasn't picked up to begin with. And speaking of suits, this wouldn't be the last time TV show audiences saw this costume. Though I guess it also wouldn't be the first time, considering TV show audiences did not, in fact, see this costume. People on the internet did. Actually, actress Erica Durance of Smallville fame would wear this very costume on an episode of Harry's Law, a show made by the would-be showrunner of this would-be Wonder Woman show, in which she plays a delusional woman who believes herself to be the actual Wonder Woman. Strangely enough, this wouldn't even be Erica's first time dressed up as Wonder Woman, as she'd wear a separate Wonder Woman costume on an episode of Smallville once before. Man, that's gotta be weird for Clark. His girlfriend dressed up as his ex-girlfriend, or vice versa depending on what you're reading. Which really just goes to show you that sometimes fact is stranger than fiction. And fact making up fiction seems to be even stranger. David E. Kelley, the writer of the show, actually has been quoted as saying that he knew that he'd made mistakes with the character, and that if the show was greenlit, those problems would have been fixed and the product could have been fleshed out over time. And you know something? I sort of agree with him. This show wasn't great, but I do think it could have been salvaged. There were plenty of problems, but there were also plenty of positives that came with it as well. This was only their first attempt. I think that they had the right names attached to the project from a cast standpoint, but perhaps the wrong people backing this idea creatively. Ironically enough, I agree with the writer, but I also in part blame him. I think if this wasn't following his specific vision, and instead followed the established lore and legend of Wonder Woman, it probably would have done significantly better. There's a lot of good here, but it's surrounded by so much bad and so much bland that to some, it becomes as invisible as Wonder Woman's jet. Which, by the way, is in fact not invisible in this pilot. So, make of that what you will. Make no mistake, I didn't like this pilot. Had this show been made following this premise, I wouldn't have liked it either. However, I can't deny that there were pretty talented people attached to the project who seemed pretty passionate about what it was they were doing.
You were a big Wonder Woman fan going into it?
Huge. You know, I've been a comic book fan since I was a kid. My brother's a comic book writer. Getting to play Wonder Woman was surreal.
There was about a dark 5 years where it was really like that was a hard one to come back from, because I loved doing that. I think we just missed the mark too, honestly, because like a year later is when Marvel and DC, like everything blew up.
I think Adrienne Palicki was a pretty good Wonder Woman considering the creative she was up against, and should be viewed as the standout star in all of this. Although I imagine it's hard not to stand out when all that's left is creative rubble. Overall, I think the studio made the right call with canceling this one and ending it before it started. But believe it or not, this still wasn't even the last attempt at creating a Wonder Woman series. So if you like this video and want to see more, let me know in the comment section below by leaving a comment saying,
"Is that Wonder Woman?"
Now, before I go, I don't usually do this. I've had a Patreon for a while now, but I've really struggled with what to do with it. Luckily, the time is upon us where I can actually offer you guys exclusive and extended content that I can't make here on the channel. With new restrictions on what kind of content can be monetized or hell, even shown here on the platform, now's as good a time as ever to be placing my completely unaltered, uncensored, extended videos on my Patreon. I don't want to put my videos behind a paywall, but that's kind of the best place to put them for the time being. So if there was ever a time to give a stranger money on the internet, well, I would like to think that now is that time. Just so everyone knows, all the money I make off my Patreon goes directly back into the channel. Everyone who donates to the Patreon will not be seen as a fan, but rather a producer of said content. And you will be credited as such in the closing credits here on the channel. So if you have the time and $1 to spare, help a guy out. If you can't, I appreciate your time and attention nonetheless.
I am vengeance. I am the night, and that was V Infuso. Just remember, if you're not tuning in, then you're missing out.
So, if you like the words that came out of his mouth hole, and you too would like to become a V-generate, don't forget to like and subscribe. Thanks for watching, nerds!
And if you're not joining the fun, you're in for one bad day. And you know what they say about having one bad day?
Catch him next time. Same bat time. Same bat channel.